When companies are thinking about how to evaluate themselves, what makes the difference between like a 2x and a 10x? Why does
Growth,
Salesforce get bought for billions?
growth.
Why?
All it's typically the magic number is usually 10 million in annual recurring revenue.
Mhm.
Once you kind of hit that threshold, you enter a different pool of institutional buyers, specifically on the private equity and the strategic side. They see
Mhm.
your business as a very valuable asset, more valuable than it is to you, and so they'll pay really high multiples. Some buyers will pay for future potential based on if you're growing like 10% month over month, every month that they wait to acquire your business, it's worth more and more and more. Name is Andrew Gazdecki, kind of a startup junkie, so to speak. I love startups, love working with entrepreneurs. And most recently, I founded a marketplace called MicroAcquire where I help startups get acquired.
How'd you get started with MicroAcquire? Why'd you decide the world needed this?
Yeah. So the exit, or just the part of the founder's journey of being acquired, is such an important part, in my opinion. And there just isn't a lot of resources around getting acquired. I've had two companies acquired, and just going through that process personally, it was really confusing. I probably made some mistakes. And after I had sold my second company, I was actually looking to buy a SaaS company myself, and looked around the market, and I was surprised just at the lack of options available, even when you're looking to buy companies. So I kind of just scratched my own itch. There's some pivotal companies in the startup ecosystem that I love, such as you have Product Hunt for discovery, you have AngelList for investing, and I thought there should be something for acquisitions for the exit of your business. And so yeah, just kind of scratch my own itch. I always like to add, I didn't think it was going to work when I launched it. I ran it for free for about 10 months, then eventually started charging for access to the deals on the platform, which was really a function of founders saying like, hey, we're getting way too many like requests. Who should we talk to?
Mhm.
So that worked as like a filter. But yeah, long story short, I just thought it should exist. I wanted a marketplace for you to buy and sell startups. Looked at the other solutions in the marketplace, and I thought, you know, this is a market that hasn't seen a lot of innovation in a decade, and maybe I can make something cool.
What are some of the things people don't think about when they're selling a startup that they really should be?
Um, a lot of things. I would say the number one thing is valuation. I think every founder thinks their business is worth just take your revenue number
Mm.
and multiply by 10 or 20, because that's what Salesforce bought Slack for. But that's generally not the case. Also, just the importance of understanding buyer expectations. What are they looking for in your business? Being prepared in terms of having your books in order. Like, do you have a P&L that goes over, even a simple one that goes over your expenses and your revenue, to give a healthy snapshot of your business? And then another one, just from a personal standpoint, is just understanding why you want to sell the business. That's usually the biggest red flag to me, is when it's just not kind of clear with a founder. They're just kind of, yeah, I don't know. Like, when you sell your business, unless you have a fantastic business and you're not looking to sell it, if you really want to show buyers that you're serious, just being forthcoming and saying, I'm looking to sell a business, I'm looking to move on to something else, or I've been in the business for 8 years and I'm exhausted. um, not necessarily in a rush to sell, but I'm open to hearing offers. So I'd say, just going over the list, the more you can do to educate yourself on how acquisitions work, from the legal stages, understanding what due diligence is, to having all necessary information that buyers would want to see, and just understanding from you personally, like, what do you want to get out of an acquisition? What is, what you feel is a fair valuation? And just having all that together really increases the chance of you, successfully selling your business.
When companies are thinking about how to evaluate themselves, what makes the difference between like a 2x and a 10x? Why does
Growth,
Salesforce get bought for billions?
growth.
Bye.
All it's if you have a business that's unprofitable, it's declining, it's in a weird market, the customer base is high churn, that's going to command a far lower multiple than a company like Slack. And then also scale. So this is another thing people don't understand is when typically the magic number is usually 10 million in annual recurring revenue. Once you kind of hit that threshold, you enter a different pool of institutional buyers, specifically on the private equity and the strategic side. And to kind of back up, a strategic buyer is Slack getting acquired, like Salesforce, Google, Apple. They see your business as a very valuable asset, more valuable than it is to you, and so they'll pay really high multiples. For private equity, traditional private equity looks for businesses generally above 10 million, definitely below 10 million too, but that's when the multiples start to increase because you have a business at scale. So um, really just having a good business is the core of it. If you're growing, you can command much higher multiples because um, some buyers will pay for future potential based on if you're growing like 10% month over month, every month that they wait to acquire your business, it's worth more and more and more and more. And so uh yeah, having a fast growing business is definitely what drives multiples up.
I've got a question here from Martin. Go for it, Martin.
I wasn't expected I will come so soon into the room, but yeah, okay. Andrew, hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
It's really a pleasure. I follow you on LinkedIn all the time and reading your awesome
Thanks,
posts.
I appreciate that.
It's a really inspiring story. Great stuff you're doing there. I have a question about P&L you mentioned. So how soon is it good for a founder to use the proper tool to track all the profit losses and every data that is relevant to a point where you sell? So if I turn it out more simply into a question, when should I care about the tool I'm using to track all the expenses and profits and all the numbers that I will eventually have to show to someone, which of course benefit also to me, but as an early founder, I'm trying to avoid paying for the costs of using that tool prematurely. So would you recommend at any point when should I start doing that? And do you have any recommendation which tool works best for early startup founders?
Yeah, that's a great question. Best tool I found, Google Sheets and Excel. I wish there was something better. But I'll say this from experience. So I hired my first VP of finance at my first business. Um, business business app spelled BIZNESS. I always have to like spell it out because it's spelled business. I couldn't afford the real spelling domain. But I hired a VP of finance pretty late into the business, and after working with this individual, changed my whole operational perspective on running a startup. Because yeah, you can get your expenses, your revenue, and kind of have an understanding of when am I going to run out of money. But a good VP of finance will also build you a revenue model. So they'll point out all the growth levers in your business. So, for example, you have traffic coming in at this amount, you have traffic converting to free trials at this percentage, free trials are converted to paying customers at this percentage, and then your paying customers are churning at this percentage, and those are all dials. So what happens if we increase traffic by 10% every single month? And then you start to see that trickle down what the growth looks like. So I used to do stuff where I'd say we're going to grow by 20% this quarter, by just working hard. But when you work with, a CFO or VP of finance, like just to put another perspective on this. So at MicroAcquire, we're a team of about 10 people at this point. And one of the first hires I made was hiring my VP of finance back. because it's like flying a plane with no lights, which is a terrible analogy because planes don't fly with lights. It's like driving a car without lights on, at least for me. So it's one of those experiences where when you bring that operational and financial rigor into your business, it does two things. And at least for me, it's helped me really understand how to grow my company as fast as possible by understanding what knobs I should pull on. Like, should I focus on, the free trial to paying customer conversion rates really low? Let's focus on that. That if we can dial that knob up, wow, look how revenue explodes. And that's kind of the priority that your whole team gets focused on. And then number two, it just builds so much goodwill in terms of speaking with buyers. So when I sold business apps, I sold to a private equity firm, and really most of the due diligence was with my CFO. It was just, what's your revenue? Like, I have tons of data pull requests, really complicated things, everything down to how many support tickets we're answering, how quickly, and he was able to help with all of that. So if you're just starting out, I would recommend just finding a consultant and just kind of speaking with them for a few hours. But for me as a founder, I can't operate without that sort of, visibility into my business. How much revenue are we generating? What are we projecting to generate by the end of the year? And then really planning that out. How do we accelerate that? What are the, growth drivers that is currently bringing in that revenue? And what can we kind of pull on to increase that? So really long-winded answer, but I always tell founders, hire a VP of finance, because I always get these comments like, but I'm too small, I don't need one, like all this stuff. And I'm like, you haven't worked with one. And until you've like worked with one, you really, because as an entrepreneur, you're kind of like ready, aim, fire, let's go, I don't need this yet. And then just having that sort of yin yang of like, hey, let's actually plan this out. You want to grow by 20%? Well, let's have some different sort of like ways that can happen, which dials that we can focus on pulling, because you can't pull on all of them all the time. You can, but it can just be messy and confusing on what your strategy is. So yeah, I mean,
You
it
answered
just,
my question. You answered my
I
question.
did okay. I'm basically gonna summarize it as soon as you can afford just a few hours, because not only can they help you sell your business, and what I mean by sell is they help really show the health of your business and builds goodwill with buyers as well, where this is factual numbers by a financial professional, rather than here's some P&L I kind of just put together, I think it's right, it's probably off. And then two, prior to selling, they'll really kind of point out opportunities to grow your business. So
Good stuff. Thank you.
Sorry for the long-winded answer, but I
No,
love that.
it's great. It's great. Thanks.
What do you, if I can follow up on that, what are you looking for in a good VP of finance or a CFO?
What do I look for?
What do you look for, and how do you find them in the first place?
Yeah, people are always asking, how do you find people? Number one, recruiters. Two, just networking with people. I met my CFO just through a recruiting firm. Like, I want to hire a VP of finance that has experience in SaaS. And so you get a bunch of candidates, you interview a ton. But the way I hire is I typically look for personality traits before skill sets. So I hire for motivation, attitude, and skill set in that order. So I spend a lot of time figuring out if I will enjoy working with this person, and then if they would enjoy working at the company, and then lastly, if I think they do a good job. Because the chemistry of the people that I work with is so much more important to me than having like a really like 20 years of experience and I've done all this cool stuff, and I really don't care. Like, I think those are great things, but if we don't mesh on a personal level, and I bring that up because a CFO or a VP of finance is sometimes the person that's helping the CEO of a company drive the strategy of the business, but in the background. So it's kind of like a true partner. But things that I would look for is just, experience in SaaS. Have you ever ran a P&L before? Have you ever created one from scratch? There's there's so many different types of financial individuals that you can hire, like a controller, you can hire just a part-time fractional CFO, VP of finance, all kind of the same thing, just different levels of engagement. But I always like to have someone that I can share concerns with, like, hey, I think we're spending a little bit too much and maybe we should reduce it. How do you recommend we do that? And that sort of personal relationship is really important to me. So kind of a cop-out answer, but that's me.
All right, next question we've got comes from Kofi.
Hey,
Go for it.
thank you very much. This is a very good session. I follow Andrew on Twitter quite a bit. I'm really impressed with what he's
Thanks,
doing.
man.
You touched on, I think you tweeted something a few days ago about sort of some of the buyers you're seeing coming onto the platform, and I just wanted to understand, what's the typical buyer profile on MicroAcquire, and also who's doing sort of the most activity in terms of, is it institutional people, is it sort of lifestyle, trying to buy a business to retire? I just wanted to understand sort of the landscape a bit more.
Yeah, really good question. So it's another cop-out answer. It's kind of everybody. So we post a wide range of businesses on MicroAcquire. Everything, like today we took a couple businesses doing over $1 million in revenue live. And those are obviously probably going to be acquired by either strategic acquirers, which would be, maybe a CEO of a company or, a private equity firm. Traditional private equity, or kind of like a new micro PE firm. I consider micro PE kind of to be like a 2-3 person shop using personal capital, hasn't raised outside funding yet. But loads of private equity people, like lots of people interested in acquiring companies right now, both on the individual level and both on the professional level, and also on the not professional, financial and strategic. So we have public CEOs signed up on MicroAcquire. We have, which is kind of cool because I don't get, if I met like LeBron James, like I probably wouldn't get nervous, but if I meet like the founder of like HubSpot, I'll get like oh, you founded HubSpot, like that's so cool. So I love seeing those users sign up. Lots of probably all the people that are buying companies that you see on Twitter are signed up generally. But a lot of individual buyers too. I see all the time people buying. We list really small companies too. We list pre-revenue companies from time to time. We're pretty picky, but I like listing those businesses because we don't make any money from selling the $5 million business or the 5K business, but I personally like listing the smaller businesses too, like micro SaaS, which we actually have as like a little category, which is like my favorite area. Because a lot of people are looking to start companies, and maybe they're not technical, and maybe they're good at sales and marketing, and so we find really good pre-revenue SaaS businesses that are priced pretty fairly, like really just kind of like the founder's time. And you can acquire a company for 5K, 10K, then all the way up to $10 million if that's what you're looking for. So it's kind of everybody. And I should also preface that with we don't have full visibility into who's actually doing each acquisition. So everything's private on MicroAcquire. Like the way I find out about acquisitions is sometimes on Twitter. Like I did a podcast with someone recently, and she had acquired 2 different companies on MicroAcquire, and we were scheduled to talk about one. And then on the podcast, she's like, "Oh, I just acquired another one." We're building in mechanics to give more visibility to and that'll be released next week, where you can send and receive letter of intents within MicroAcquire. But another long-winded answer, but kind of everybody, which is that's probably been the most surprising part about launching MicroAcquire, is just the interest of all levels, from Like there's probably something that you could acquire based on if you're into SaaS, e-commerce, crypto, mobile apps, all the way up to really large SaaS company.
That's a very useful answer, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Next up, we got Ben.
Ben,
Cool,
what's
very cool.
up?
Super cool. Thank you for talking. This is a follow-up from the question Martin had, I think, on the bringing on a finance person, bringing on a head of finance early on. I think another interesting thing that is when people bring on a recruiter or head of talent or whatever they want to call it. What's the exact question I had? How quickly bring on a recruiter, or do you outsource, or what do you think is like a good way to think about that?
Oh, outsource. Unless you've raised like a bunch of capital and you have like 50 roles you need to fill and you're the CEO and you don't have time to handle that process. One firm I would highly recommend is Altair Staffing. In full transparency, that's my wife's agency. She owns a recruiting firm, but she's helped me hire over 100 people, and they work on an hourly rate. So essentially, they're like a in-house recruiter, but you just pay them by the hour. But that's how I found my CFO. So I found my VP of engineering that I work with now. That's how I hired everyone on my sales team. So there's two types of recruiting firms that you can work with. Typically, most operate under a contingency model, which means they find you a really talented engineer or something like that, and you pay them 30% of the first year's salary. They work on an hourly model. And so if you go to Altair Staffing and just say, hey, Andrew mentioned me, like I know you're his wife, she'll run like a free search for you.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks.
How do you spell that?
Altera staffing.com. And I designed the website, so I'm really proud of that.
Not biased.
Oh, totally biased. No, they are really good because what they do is they essentially will just they'll go through LinkedIn. So if you're looking for a VP of finance with SaaS experience, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, like you just kind of give specific criteria. They can either just do a quick poll of that list so you can reach out to them yourselves, which is super easy to do. That's like 2 hours of work. Or they can actually do the initial reach out calls to see if they're interested in a job change. So you're just reaching out to passive candidates rather than I don't recommend job postings. I've never had success with job postings. Maybe things have changed, but job postings, you post VP of finance and you get like you're just digging through resumes, and it's usually a waste of time in my experience.
When you're thinking about when or if to sell a startup, are there certain points in the life cycle of a startup when it's more strategic to look for a buyer than others?
There's these things called local maximums. Like typically in kind of like the first year, depending on how your startup is doing, you might start to get approached. I've actually turned down a few pretty serious acquisition offers already with MicroAcquire, and it's just kind of like it's in its infancy. Maybe a larger company can think like, oh, this could fit in really well. It's usually easy tuck in for the company. And what I mean by that is, the team's small. It'd be a very easy acquisition to do. There's not a lot of complexity, and we can build this out inside of our business. So if you're lucky enough to, be approached for those types of acquisitions, those are worth considering. But I always like to talk about, the best time to sell a startup is really when you're ready. Because when you sell a startup, I mean, you're going to have to do something else afterwards, unless you're going to retire or something. And from my experience, most entrepreneurs don't retire. So you want to sell the business when either you're, kind of exhausted and you'd like to move on to something else. And that's why I sold business apps. I'd ran the business for 8 years, and I just wanted to, it was only my job before that was at Sears. I also worked at Baskin Robbins and movie theater. So, I wanted to take, my skill sets and move on to another business. And so I did. So I sold the business. And it was the best decision I ever made. My second business, Allcoin, we kind of sold that at a local maximum. I ran that business for about a year. We sold that to a strategic company called B&K to the Future. And that was more of a IP sale where we just kind of built the product out and then they basically tucked it into their business and launched it. So timing, it's interesting. Sometimes you're approached. Sometimes you're just approached out of nowhere. And it's a perfect fit. But like another thing I'll say with acquisitions, just outside of MicroAcquire is, you always want to keep people that are potentially interested in acquiring your company on your radar, like check in with them, see if there's a partnership opportunity. Is there an integration opportunity to get on their radar? And then if you're just, you know, looking to exit the business quickly, MicroAcquire's, a pretty effective way of doing that. So I like to think of it as more of a personal thing, or if you're just throwing enough money, like that's just your goal is to make a ton of money, and someone comes with you with a ridiculous offer that's hard to turn down. Um, Other things I'll add is, knowing when your business is sellable. Like if you're bleeding cash and you're just looking for like things are just not going well, probably fix those first before looking to sell your business. Otherwise, you're just not going to get, you're not going to maximize the outcome.
All right, so I guess for the final question, we'll take Chris's. What's the use case for selling through MicroAcquire versus other platforms?
It's completely free. There's no fees. And
Good
we'll
answer.
get you up. We'll go, yeah. So yeah, MicroAcquire, we don't charge any commissions. It's entirely private, so you're not sharing your startup with the world. All buyers are vetted, so you're not going to get a million requests from Andrew 999-421. You have no idea who I am. Every buyer account has a LinkedIn account attached, so you can do a little bit of due diligence on them before granting them access to your private details, which would include your company name, your URL, or whatever other materials you upload. But yeah, it's a free resource for entrepreneurs. So you can go on there, list your business, get acquired, and it's completely free for entrepreneurs. And that's why I made it.
Amazing. Helen, do you have any questions for Andrew while we have you both?
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, what kind of topics or areas or themes of businesses seem to be quite popular at the moment? Is there any kind of sort of niches that seem to be doing quite well?
Yeah, good question. So MicroAcquire, I originally started it focusing on SaaS, and that's still the major focus of the marketplace. But my answer to that would be kind of every type of scalable tech business. So we have categories for crypto companies now. I've seen a large rise in really, really nice and profitable mobile apps being listed. Shopify SaaS apps sell very fast. A lot of e-commerce, direct to consumer, even some agencies, so service businesses as well. So we've started expanding the categories. So I would say just across the board, there's interest, because some people like SaaS. I like SaaS because that's where my experience is. Some people really like, portfolios of mobile apps. And so those are being acquired. Some people come from e-commerce, and so that's what they're looking for. But I'd say the biggest trend is that's been the most surprising and nice for me to see is just the long tail of software. And what I mean by that is just the cool niches that I like. I have the coolest job where I wake up every morning and I go through the submissions, and just it really opens my eyes to just how big and how much opportunity there is for entrepreneurs in software today. Like one recent listing was, a marketing platform for dentists or something like that. So like there's just so much opportunity, and you may not build like $1 billion, public company, but you know, you can build these businesses in a niche to a specific customer type, and do really well. And I think that's probably been, you know, one of my favorite trends that I've seen.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming here, giving us your time, answering all of our questions. For anybody watching, if you're trying to sell a startup, go check out MicroAcquire.
Yeah.
And any parting words for us?
No, this is awesome. I didn't know what I was getting into. I came straight from a meeting, and just kudos on the community you built, and thanks everybody for coming and hearing me talk. It means a lot to me. And if there's any questions that any of you have that maybe you want to ask, you know, in private or something like that, feel free to email me at andrew@microacquire.com, and happy to help. And yeah, just you know, if you're working on a startup, just understand it's hard. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for even me. So just keep pushing and stay positive, and have fun.
Thanks, Andrew, and we'll see you around the interwebs. Feel free to stick around for the rest of the event if you don't have a very busy day. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. All right, see you, everybody.